Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to cover issue number 1 of Astonishing Icemen, which was written by Steve Orlando. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this comic will finally answer the question about what happened with Iceman following the gala. Because with Bobby in your face death, questions have been raised about Bobby's future fate in the X-Men world. So with that out there, this issue opens with several social media posts mentioning Iceman being spotted around the globe. Which is a big deal, because as of the HELLFIRE Gala, Bobby was taken out by Nimrod in a crazy fashion. So with the news of the Omega still out there, we transition over to a celebration gone wrong, when Orchis robotic tracking dogs start to detect an X gene within the crowd, despite no mutants actually being there. Now the reason why this is happening is because apparently, Orchis didn't care to distinguish people with the X gene from people who used X experience. Because the target they are hunting down took part in using X experience once upon a time. But see, that isn't where the chaos ended, because Orchis drones are also shooting into the crowds indiscriminately in an attempt to hit the so-called mutant. Which means everyone is paying the consequences for Orchis's mistakes. So as everyone ran in fear in different directions, out of nowhere snow began to fall over the scared people, for the Omega-level mutant, Iceman, had arrived on the scene. And within seconds Bobby immediately took out several of the drones and erected an ice wall for protection. But despite him saving the day along with their lives, the people of this town didn't really give him a hero's welcome, for they blamed him for the chaos that was unfolding. The people stated that his presence will just intensify the robots' assault. But regardless of the hate towards him, Bobby was determined to do the right thing. So as the former X-Experience user continued to run for his life, the drone in pursuit of him gradually started to close in on him. And right before the drone could cut him down, Bobby came smashing through the robotic menace. And unlike the bystanders, this man was highly grateful for Iceman's assistance. So with that said, it is key to point out how these drones were made to hunt down only mutants, but it seems like Orchis has bigger plans in store for the world. So following Iceman's daring heroics, we jump up to Orchis Bloom Station orbiting 1,200 miles above the world. And when we get there, we see Orchis going over everything that went down in the city, which includes the interferences of the once believed dead Iceman. Which is the complete opposite of what the captain of this unit wanted to hear. Because this captain is basically out looking for a promotion to ascend the ranks of Orchis. But with the constant interferences of Iceman going down, the likelihood of him achieving that is getting smaller and smaller by the day. So in order to self-preserve his goals, Bobby was now promoted to his primary target, public enemy number 1, under his watch. So with Bobby standing between the captain and his promotion, we jump over to the southern pole of Antarctica where Bobby keeps his ice palace. And when we get there, we see Iceman struggling to make his way inside his home. But once in, he collapses onto the ground and points out how it was a close one and how he just loves pushing his limits. But one thing about Iceman we have to remember is that near-death experiences don't mean much if you're not living your life to the fullest. So as he struggles to recover from his near-death ordeal, he snapped his fingers and created a snowman assistant to help him back to his room. And while he traveled, we get our explanation of what happened during the HELLFIRE Gala and how he survived Orchis's attack. Because during Bobby's fight with Nimrod injected him with cellular napalm, which in his words, hurt like hell to the point where he could barely think, despite the whole ordeal being extremely quick. But see, the pain of course, hurt really bad, but the worst pain came from having Romeo witness the whole thing. Because before when a mutant died, they were just brought back, but this time, the Krakoan resurrection process was off the table. So this time, if he dies, Romeo would be the one who would have to live with the consequences and keep going. Now everyone including the telepaths believes Bobby to be dead, but Romeo alone believed him to be alive. For Romeo was Bobby's lighthouse, his empath. And the more Romeo connected to someone, the more he feels for them, the more his power can affect them. Now, Bobby at this time might not have had any thoughts to speak of, but he did have feelings. He had enough feelings out there in the world for his loved one. Enough for Romeo to grab and hold and pull back together. So with that said, Romeo was the last face Bobby saw when he died, and he was also the first face he saw when he awoke. So what's that explanation out there? We pick back up in current day with Bobby hearing Romeo's voice coming from the war room. And Romeo is telling him that he understands that this is his life and this stronghold is made of his ice. And he also completely understands that Bobby wants it to be like it was before. But every time he leaves the stronghold, it's harder and harder for him to keep Bobby together. Because when Bobby is out in the world, there is no anchor. And to make things worse, every time Bobby leaves, he pushes his limits more and more. Which is extremely dangerous, because as soon as he is away from his side, the clock begins to tick down, and once it hits 0, Bobby will be no more. So with that said, Bobby tries his best to reassure Romeo by telling him that as long as he has him by his side, they will be perfectly fine, and all Romeo needs to do is point him in the direction he needs to go in order to accomplish his goals. Now, this is when Romeo clapped back by saying that Bobby doesn't get it, that he's not just there to help him and the mutants, because people like Orchis will not just stop at mutants, because they will eventually move on to semi-mutants. And then from there, they will eventually move on to the Inhumans. So with that said, we get a data page explaining everything that is going on, to help explain how Bobby is able to function. In this data page, we see that the palace is made up of ice from Bobby, and through this ice, Romeo established a war room where he can basically use that ice as a satellite dish to amplify his reach and generate an empathic display. Now this empathic display is an Iceman icon, and the Bobby we see is basically a hologram, which means you can see it more than feel it. And all of this reacts to Bobby's emotional state, no matter where he is in the world, which makes what happens to Iceman visible to him on the outside. It helps him affects and aids his emotional state from afar, but not forever. So if Bobby was to break down out there, then he would also break down in here. So basically, the icon serves as a status bar, basically acting like a video game. So with that out there, Bobby is only alive because Romeo wills him to be. Which is a pretty cool concept for a temporary workaround for the resurrection process. And on a side note, I always said that I wanted the Inhumans to play a part in the Krakoan story. And hopefully this is just an introduction into a bigger Inhuman storyline, because Romeo did foreshadow Orchis's bigger plans that could involve the Inhumans. So with that out there, we skip over to the Orchis Bloom Station once again. And this time, they're currently on the move, for they had devised a plan to attack Bobby where it hurts the most. His human mother, Madeline Drake, in Fort Washington. And the reason why they are doing this is to, of course, lure Bobby in and take him down. Now Bobby spent his whole life mastering hydrogen and oxygen. So what do you think he'll do against the other 116? But anyway, down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.